Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
The story of really why I wanted to write this book, well, one, I've been wanting to write it for a really long time because I've been using the Enneagram since my kids were 1 and 3. Now, of course, I've grown in how I use that, but I could see how beneficial it was. And the original story goes back to really when I started learning the Enneagram back in seminary. I would take the kids to the playground. So I lived in an apartment on the seminary. So there's lots of us moms, and we would take our kids to the playground. And I would see all of these moms, their incredible qualities. Like one was strong and assertive, and the other one was creative, and the other one was fun. The other one was successful. I mean, I'm seeing all these different moms, and I'm like, oh, they're so amazing. And then I know myself, so I'm like, but I'm not all of those things, right? And so I told my husband this when I got back one day, and he's like, Beth, you're creating one big super mom out of all of these incredible qualities from all of these women.
Yep.
You're making it into one person that doesn't exist. And he said, plus, you don't know what they're like behind their closed doors and what they're struggling with. And I was like, you're right.
I'm Julie Lyles Carr. You're listening to the AllMomDoes podcast. I got to tell you, as you can imagine, and I'm so honored and blessed that we do get this, we get a lot of different requests for interviews. We have publicists contact us, and we're sorting through that all the time, trying to decide what you, the listener, are going to want to know about, what's going to help you when it comes to raising your kids and nurturing your marriage and chasing your career and growing in your faith walk. I barely got even through the first sentence before I was frantically hitting the button. Yes. I want to talk to this person when we got this email. And I think you're going to be really excited and energized and so informed by what my guest's area of expertise is. Beth McCord, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be so much fun.
I can't wait to start the reveal here, what we're going to talk about. Before we get to the topic, could you tell the listener where you're living, what your life is like, what family life is like, all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Beth McCord lived just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Been married to my husband, Jeff, for 29 years. We got married when we were 20, had both our kids at 25, and they are now grown. And we actually have our first grandson who's 4 months old. And that has been super fun and sweet. They all live nearby. So that's been really nice. So we're in that kind of really new season of adult kids and beginning to be grandparents. And what does this look like? So we're really enjoying that. And then just, continuing to enjoy doing the work that I get to do with the Enneagram, helping people to understand themselves with astonishing clarity so they can really be the healthiest version of who they were created to be. So that's what I get to do.
That's so exciting. We just had our first grandbaby not all that long ago as well. And you're right. It is such an amazing season. And we both have granddogs, as we talked about before we got on live on the mics. And so, I understand the grandmother life as well. So I'm glad you're there with me. So you gave a little bit of a reveal. You are all into quite the expert and the author and the speaker on this thing called the Enneagram. Now, I might have a listener that just got a little worried because, Beth, let's face it, as much as I love all kinds of personality style tests and assessments and ways of looking at the way that God knit us together, sometimes there's been a little controversy around the Enneagram. Right. So how do you work with that? What do you say to someone who has a concern?
Yeah, I mean, totally understandable. And first and foremost, I just want to say it is a tool of many tools out there. It's not the tool. The tool is what God gives us. And so it is just a tool. So if you want to use it, great, use it. If you don't feel comfortable using it, great, pick another tool. That's totally fine. But when it comes to some of the things that are raised as in, is this, a good thing or not so good thing from a Christian perspective, a lot of the things that people are saying about it are actually myths and not true. Even though they really feel like they have the documentation and all of that, it's actually not true. So if you go to our website, yourenneagramcoach.com/origins, you're going to get a lot of information on where the origins really came from. And I would highly recommend clicking the link that Tyler Zach did, a free video on YouTube, he has done the most extensive research, most current extensive research. And he's a pastor. So you just get some really good information, not only from a pastor, but an Enneagram expert on really what are these things that people are kind of leery about, and are they true or not? And so for me, I'm like, they're not true. And the Enneagram, like I said, is just a tool like Myers-Briggs, like Strength Finders. And so we can use it to help us know ourselves better. And the way we use it at Your Enneagram Coach is to help us to understand who God created us to be, but not in a place of shame, self-condemnation, and fear. We want to move away from that so we can know and experience His unconditional love, forgiveness, and freedom. And so for us, that's the whole paradigm. It's not to put you in a box. It's not to show you how terrible you are. We all know we struggle. That's not the issue. We know that. It's okay, so we do struggle, but we were also created to reflect God in some really incredible ways. So how can we understand that? So I really talk about the Enneagram being like a rumble strip on the highway. Oftentimes when we're going down the journey of life, we go right past that rumble strip and into our common pitfalls. And then we kind of throw up our hands and go, how did I get here again?
Yeah.
Did I not learn my lesson? And well, it's because we didn't know that there was a rumble strip, and we didn't know to listen to it, to pay attention to it. We were just going so fast in life and in the same direction that we typically go when we're not doing well. So the Enneagram can help alert us oh, my personality, when I'm not doing so well, I might think, feel, or behave in these particular ways. And when I can observe or see or be alerted to that, I have the opportunity to correct course. I have an opportunity to become back into the healthier path that was designed for me. And that's where we get to lean on God and all that He is and is for us to help us in that path. So I just really think the Enneagram is such a powerful tool. But again, it is just a tool of many things out there.
Right. I have been fascinated with the Enneagram for quite a while. Now, my background is one of my degrees is in psych. And so I was trained in the DISC and in Myers-Briggs and all of those. And actually, one of my books, Raising an Original, is predicated on the DISC system, which is another personality style assessment. When I encountered the Enneagram, one of the things that I really appreciated was it has this point, if you're not familiar with it, of 9 different personality styles. And for me, Beth, I don't know why, but there was something that it was not as many as the Myers-Briggs, which can feel really overwhelming. And it wasn't as few as the DISC. And both of those have their strengths in terms of taking a look at who you are, who the people you love, who they are. There was something about having more options, but not overwhelming options that was really helpful. And there were a lot of things that really resonated with me. For you, when did you first encounter the Enneagram system? What about it caught gear for you that made sense as you were looking at people and looking at yourself and wanting to go on that path of discovery?
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I had both my kids by the age of 25. And by the age of 26, Jeff was in seminary and I was a stay-at-home mom. And I was just unaware of myself. And so Jeff and I, though best friends, we were hitting some turbulence like a lot of couples do, especially when you get married so young. But I didn't know how to explain how I was feeling or why I was experiencing it a certain way, which was hard for him because he wanted to learn and grow. But I'm just like, just me, I don't know. And so a friend of ours that was introduced to the Enneagram by his counselor, so this is way back in 2001, long time ago, he said, hey, I think you might be interested in this. So I started reading about the Enneagram and I just got it. I just understood it. And I found my type right away. I'm the type 9, the peaceful accommodator. And then everything made more sense. And how I like to describe the type 9s in the way of why I was struggling to understand myself is the 9s, it's like we have this internal fog. And it's really hard to understand ourselves because we're so focused on other people, making other people happy because we hate conflict. And so I had never done a real inner work of myself. And this book put language to what I knew was in there, but I didn't know how to describe it. And that really helped our marriage substantially. And it has over the course of the years. So that's for me how and why I really started getting into it. And then I just was so fascinated by the clarity of it. I mean, it's almost like is someone reading my internal diary? Like, what is happening? I just kept learning and studying and grabbing books. And this was before there were podcasts. This was before social media. So it was like you either, got a book from the store or you flew somewhere to get trained. We didn't have money for that. So I just kept reading and reading and reading and studying until we started to use it in the church with other couples. My husband at that time was an associate pastor, and we saw them thriving. And then it kind of snowballed from there. But that is really kind of how I began, was really my own self-work and to help our marriage.
How do you give the elevator pitch, the short definition of what the Enneagram is? Now, I think
Yes.
the listener is probably familiar. This has probably come up for them. And I encounter people who aren't familiar with it. And so how do you kind of give that little snapshot? I know it's layered and there's a whole lot to it, but what's the snapshot that you give?
Well, that is the hard part. I think a lot of teachers, the Enneagram can be a very complex system, but it doesn't have to be. And so for me, my passion is to make the Enneagram easily accessible and understandable so we can use it. So really think of the Enneagram as 9 different colored glasses. Like you and I have glasses on right now. And let's say you're wearing red glasses and I'm wearing purple glasses. Well, we might still be seeing the same thing. Let's say we're side by side. We're seeing the same things, but from a different lens, a different perspective. And that's really what the Enneagram is about. The Enneagram gets to the why you think, feel, and behave based off of your perspective from your type's core motivations. And so we want people to know that there are 9 valid perspectives. And so when you're looking at that, it helps us to go, oh, that's why so-and-so does things differently. That's why they think different. That's why they behave different, because they have their own core motivations, which is a totally different perspective on life. And therefore, they're going to operate differently because of the why. And so that is really helpful. So like you and I, let's say we were best friends and you did something completely different. Well, what if I took off my purple lenses for a second and put on your red lenses? Not that I'm going to fully understand it, but I have this aha moment of, I get it. And I can extend more compassion or curiosity or empathy and to move closer in relationship versus just really being frustrated or controlling. It's lots of things that we can do. So that's kind of a quick snapshot. And the biggest thing about the Enneagram that I want to point out is really helping people to understand what their personality is like when they're healthy, average, and unhealthy. Because all 9 types are incredible when they're healthy. And as they get less healthy, there's problems to be had. And in fact, when you're really unhealthy, it's really, really bad, but in their own way. And so I'm wanting to help people to graciously look at themselves in a way that encourages them towards growth, not shame. And so that's really the work that we're doing at Your Enneagram Coach.
I've had the opportunity to teach a couple times on the Enneagram in different settings, not to the level and not with the expertise that you have, but one of the things that has always struck me that seems very revolutionary to a lot of people, and yet it's such a core question that we all ask ourselves, is why do I do the things I do? What am I motivated by in the things that I do? And when we are in relation to others, it's also one of the questions that we're quick to answer for someone else. We think we know what somebody's motivation is. If he says that, or if she does that, or if somebody handled it that way, that means that they must X, Y, Z. And yet we don't know that. We don't know the inside of their head. And yet we make a lot of judgment calls and a lot of relational decisions based on what we think someone's motivation is. So that's one of the facets of the Enneagram I've found to be so helpful and fascinating, is understanding why I'm doing the stuff I'm doing and then where that comes from, and how someone else's motivation, even though the action might look the same, is completely different and therefore has to be interpreted according to that motivation. It's just one of those things I think is really lovely. You have really niched down in a way that I think is awesome, particularly for this audience, for this listener, because you have a new book coming out called The Enneagram for Moms. Speak about this to me, Beth. I have to say, even though I feel like I do know my primary number and what we call a wing, which is that secondary number that comes alongside, even though sometimes I think they flip back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, they do.
One of the things I've had to evaluate in myself is when I was still on a church staff and was doing certain roles, there were things about my numbers that made a lot of sense. And when I moved into a different phase of my career and into different work, even though there are still a lot of the same motivations, I had to take a pause and say, okay, how does this correlate now to what I'm doing now? It was very clear what my numbers were in a sense based on what I was doing for a period of time. I feel like with moms, we have a similar kind of situation going on, that sometimes it can be a little hard to recognize yourself because you're so living outside yourself, particularly depending on the age of your kids and when you're really in the trenches with toddlers, things like that. So what was your impetus? What was your inspiration for saying, how do we apply the Enneagrams to specifically to moms? And how does that look a little different?
Yeah. So the story of really why I wanted to write this book, well, one, I've been wanting to write it for a really long time because I've been using the Enneagram since my kids were 1 and 3. Now, of course, I've grown in how I use that, but I could see how beneficial it was. And the original story goes back to really when I started learning the Enneagram back in seminary. I would take the kids to the playground. So I lived in an apartment on the seminary. So there's lots of us moms, and we would take our kids to the playground. And I would see all of these moms, their incredible qualities. Like one was strong and assertive, and the other one was creative, and the other one was fun. The other one was successful. I mean, I'm seeing all these different moms, and I'm like, oh, they're so amazing. And then I know myself, so I'm like, but I'm not all of those things, right? And so I told my husband this when I got back one day, and he's like, Beth, you're creating one big super mom out of all of these incredible qualities from all of these women.
Yep.
You're making it into one person that doesn't exist. And he said, plus, you don't know what they're like behind their closed doors and what they're struggling with. And I was like, you're right. Because I know I'm struggling behind closed doors, but they don't know that, I'm
Right.
probably out there and they're looking, oh, look how peaceful she is with her kids, and then they don't know I'm an anxious wreck back at home.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the aha moment of, okay, so us moms were created by God with our personality type for our kiddos. They're different, probably different personalities than us. They have different stories. They live in different eras. So God created me to be my kid's mom as a type 9. And so instead of me trying to follow everyone else in what they say I should be like, what is it that God's calling me to be like, and what does that look like at the healthiest level? So for me as a peaceful accommodator, that looks very different than a type 5 mom who is the analytical investigator and a type 8 protective or passionate protector. Now, are there certain elements of truth and goodness that we should all aim for? Sure, of course. But I think especially in social media, when we listen to whether it's podcast or read books or you name it, all of us moms to some form or fashion are like, what are we doing? Someone guide me. And then we follow someone and they sound great and wonderful. But if it's not really tailored to who and how we've been created, we might go down that path and it's not the right fit. And so then we feel shame, we feel guilt, we judge ourselves, and then the spiral happens. So this book is to really help moms to understand the uniqueness they've been created to be and that it is beautiful. And I'm helping them to get from those less healthy places and recognize them, that rumble strip, to who they really are and how they can reflect God in the most beautiful ways. And at the same time, bring in some of those other elements of the types. So like you said, we have our main type and it totally reigns supreme, but there are other Enneagram types that we do access and use. And how can we access them in beautiful ways? So like you said, you might go from one position to another position in the work environment or with your kids. And you're like, wait, this feels a little different. Why is that? Well, the Enneagram helps explain that. And that is a really beautiful thing. So some people can use it at a very surface level for understanding, and then you can go really far and nuance it. So it's very powerful. But the biggest thing I think I want to say is the ability to understand that you are created uniquely and that you don't have to follow everyone that you admire. That doesn't mean you should be just like them. Who were you created to be?
That is such a beautiful distinction. And I love your husband's metaphor. He's so right. We take a snapshot of people we admire, the qualities they bring, the things that they can do, and we create some kind of avatar for a supermom. And that's the thing that we try to aim for, instead of seeing each of those people as a prism, as a facet of something
Yeah.
that is beautiful, that makes up motherhood, but nobody having the whole thing, nobody having
And
every single.
most moms, if not all moms, feel they're not enough. Well, of course we don't feel enough if that's what we're doing. If we're making that one superwoman image with all the wonderful characteristics, yeah, you're not. But that's not reality, and that's not what God has called you to be. And so we are enough because of what He has created us to be, but also what He has done in and through us. And so that's where we get to then rest and grow in a whole new way.
Love that. Beth, can you give us a quick way that you describe each of the numbers of the Enneagram? And again, this won't be exhaustive. Listener,
Right.
you need to go check out the book. It's going to have more information on this. But that way,
Yeah.
if there's a listener who is not familiar with these 9 personality types, they've got something to hinge off of as we continue in our conversation. So can you just give us a quick look at each of the
Yes.
numbers?
Yeah. So the type 1 is the principled reformer. The type 2 is the nurturing supporter. The type 3 is the admirable achiever. The type 4 is the introspective individualist. The type 5 is the analytical investigator. The type 6 is the faithful guardian. The type 7 is the enthusiastic optimist. The type 8 is the passionate protector, and the type 9 is the peaceful accommodator. And you can download a free PDF from us, not just on those names, but their 4 core motivations, because everything hinges on the core motivations: your core fear, your core desire, your core weakness, and your core longing. And you can get that at yourenneagramcoach.com/core motivations. And it's just such a great resource to find which one is your main type. Okay.
Great. Friend, we'll have that at the show notes that Rebecca does for us. So you'll be able to find that link easily. If you're out walking and listening to this and you're thinking, oh no, I didn't catch that URL, that's okay.
Right.
We'll have it for you. Beth, I know sometimes that when we talk about personality assessments and styles, whatever it is, whether it's the Enneagram or any other, the question that then comes up is, well, what is nature, how God designed you, and what is nurture?
Yep.
What happened in your environment as a kid that may have driven you a certain way? I know there's been a lot of this conversation surrounding the Enneagram because we often in our culture have taken, say, guys who identify as an 8, that passionate protector. And a lot of times these are the guys that end up being strong leaders and all kinds of things. And I've read things that have talked about that if a female shows up as an 8, there are a lot of things potentially in the nurturing of her that try to swing her back to the other side of the scale. So I know this is a complex question, but how do you view nature versus nurture? How do you view some of the expectations of our culture when it comes to how we can learn who we were designed to be?
Yeah. My personal opinion, and I think a lot of teachers feel this way, but I wouldn't say all of them, is that you're born with your types. You're born with these lenses on, okay? You don't even know it. You just got these lenses on. And you're seeing and experiencing world through your core motivations, the why behind you, why you think, feel, and behave, even as a baby. So when you then experience life, the highs, the lows, the traumas, you're actually experiencing them. So you're taking in the information through your perspective. And therefore, if you've had a really great upbringing, you're going to see it through that healthy lens of your type. If you've had kind of an average, some little ups and downs, you're going to see it through that lens. And with the trauma, you're going to see it through that lens. And you're going to use your personality's defensive mechanisms and strategies to protect yourself. The reason why I say that is trauma doesn't name your type, it reveals your type.
Great.
What I mean by that is, so what I mean by that is, think about having let's say you have 8 other siblings, okay? So there's 9 of you, and you're all different Enneagram types, and you all experience a traumatic situation. All of the 9 types of the siblings are going to see it, perceive it, and then react to it from their own perspective. And so, for instance, let's say you and I, what's your type, by the way?
Well, I'm a 2-3 or a 3-2, which frankly I think is the worst because you want to help everybody and you want to be the best at it.
I love that. Okay, so we'll pretend for this exercise, we'll pretend you're an 8.
Okay.
But you're not 8.
Okay.
So let's say we're twins and you're an 8 and I'm a 9. And we have, let's say, a parent that is abusive or verbally, maybe emotionally abusive. As a 9, the peaceful accommodator who hates conflict, fears it, wants to avoid it at all costs, just wants connection. I am going to forego myself and go along to get along, okay? Because I want peace. I want harmony. And so I lose myself in the process. So with that parent, I might be trying to think of all the ways to make them happy and try to go about it. Now, probably would never work because of their personality and their own issues, but that's what I'm going to try to do. That's my perspective. Now, you, as the pretend passionate protector, they are all about protecting themselves and those in their inner circle. They don't want to be harmed, controlled, belittled, betrayed, blindsided, manipulated, and at the mercy of injustice. Well, that's literally what they're experiencing, right? So that little type 8 girl, which you were kind of alluding to, she is going to challenge. She is going to protect. She is going to assert her voice. That's very different than what I would do, right? So here, let's say you are going to speak up against that parent. You're going to challenge. You're going to assert yourself. You're going to say what needs to be said. 8s are just truth tellers. And you're protecting me and you're protecting you. Like, this injustice isn't going to happen. Well, the parent probably is not going to appreciate that, right? They're probably in some ways going to appreciate the type 9's qualities more than type 8. But guess what? That doesn't mean the 8 is worse than the 9 or the 9 is better. In fact, both are amazing. But the parent at that level wants their child to be controlled. And so the 9 is succumbing to that control and the 8 is rising up. And so what I paint in that book, that picture, is we're all trying to create many versions of ourselves, whether we realize it or not.
Yep.
Now, part of that is a positive thing. We are to impart the good qualities of who we are to our children. That is why God made us who we are. But once we start getting in a less healthy place, we start to try to control our kids, thinking our way is the way to be. And so then we're trying to make them into who we think they should be. So for instance, like that parent might be trying to control the type 8 to not be so challenging and forceful, even though they're speaking truth. And then the 9, they're just like, yes, I want you to not pay attention to yourself. You're ultimately not important. What I want is important. I want to be able to step all over you. That both are horrible. And so in our book, what I'm trying to do is help parents to understand what they're trying to do. Obviously, that's the picture of a really unhealthy parent. But let's say I had a type 8 child and I hate conflict. I hate challenge. I could see that child as bad and wrong as the peaceful accommodator. Well, now I can put on my kid's lens, even if, because you can't really know them when they're really young, but I now know there are 9 different lenses. I wonder if she's a challenger. I wonder if she's a passionate protector. Okay, so if she were to be that, she's probably trying to be very strong and assertive because she's feeling manipulated or controlled in some way. Maybe she's feeling like I'm manipulating her, being passive aggressive. So I need to be curious, ask questions, and then guide her in a way that still allows her to be her, but in an appropriate way for her age and who she's talking to. So, I could say, hey, when you're older, being in a boardroom with executives who are doing something illegal, I want you to be strong. I want you to stand up. I want you to say the truth. But right now with your mom, being that assertive isn't the best way to get where you're wanting to go. Another way of doing it is to say, hey, Mom, I have a different opinion. Can I share with you how I see it? Yeah. And so then, so I can train my child in a way that they should go, in the way I think God has created their bent. Now, if you know their type, then it's even better, because then you can really have that conversation. If you don't know their type and they haven't typed themselves yet, because it's all about the why, so they have to do it themselves, you can still be curious. It's so important that we're good students of our children and not make assumptions, like you were saying earlier, and start with, I wonder how they saw this. I wonder how they're experiencing. How can I come alongside them and support them? So I hope that kind of paints the picture between nature and nurture, that we are born our type, but we've then seen the world through our own lens and then experienced that world, whether positive or negative, through that lens.
Right. Be sure and check out the show notes that our content coordinator, Rebecca, puts together each and every week. I would love to ask you a big favor. Would you do this for me? Would you go and subscribe and like the podcast wherever you get your podcasts? It really does help get the word out. And if you leave us a 5-star rating and a really sweet review, you might just get to hear your review read online here on the podcast. I would love to connect with you on all places social. You can find me, Julie Lyles Carr. I particularly love Instagram, so come see me over there. And while you're on the webs, be sure and check out AllMomDoes.com, which is our blog and website. It's an incredible resource for you. And of course, AllMomDoes on the socials. And we also have the AllMomDoes podcast discussion group, where I check in and chat with you throughout the week about the episodes. So would love to see you there as well. I'll see you next time right here on the AllMomDoes podcast.